Hi, spiders. This week is Easter week, so we're going to read my favorite Easter story called Benjamin's Box. I know it's backwards, but it won't matter on the pictures. I have Benjamin's box, and we're going to fill it up with all the items that he comes across during the story. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Benjamin. Long ago, in a faraway land of Palestine, there lived a boy named Benjamin. His small, humble home was nestled into a wall of other houses, almost hidden on a narrow back street in the bustling city of Jerusalem. Benjamin loved Jerusalem because God's temple was there. More than that, Benjamin loved God. His grandfather had taught him many things about God when he was just a tiny boy. Benjamin talked to God a lot. He whispered, prayed each night at sunset, and in the morning, he always gave thanks for the new day. Benjamin's parents worked hard, weaving and selling cloth, but their family was still quite poor. So Benjamin helped out by taking odd jobs around the city. Everyone in Jerusalem seemed to know Benjamin. They could always count on him to be the honest and hard-working boy he was. The box. One bright spring morning, Benjamin sat outside in the sunshine. In his hands was a wooden box. "Hi, Benjamin," called out his friend, Eli. "What's you got there?" "It's my treasure box. My grandfather gave it to me before he died last year. He said it was very, very special." Eli opened it and looked in. "There's nothing in here except for some old straw. How can this be a treasure box?" Benjamin shrugged. "I don't have any real treasures yet, but my grandfather saw this straw. He said this straw came from the bed of the baby who was born in a stable. My grandfather was a shepherd then, and he said the baby would grow up to be a king." "Why would a king be born in a stable with cows and donkeys?" Eli laughed and closed the box. "I heard some sort of king is coming today. His name's Jesus. Want to come to the city gate and watch for him?" "Sure. My grandfather took me to hear a man called Jesus once. I like to listen to him." And in Benjamin's box, here's the straw. The donkey. Crowds were already lining the street. Some people cut branches down, palm branches, from trees and handed them around. Others laid garments on the street like a carpet. "Wow, he must be a king," said Benjamin. The two boys squeezed through the throngs just as a donkey entered the gate. "That's him," Benjamin pointed to the man on the donkey. "That's Jesus." "Hosanna, Hosanna," cheered the crowd as they waved their palm branches in the air. "Hail to our new king," yelled an old man next to Benjamin. "Why does a king ride on an ordinary donkey?" asked Benjamin curiously. The old man turned. "It means he comes in peace. Jesus has come to set us free." "Hail, King Jesus," he shouted. Benjamin looked into Jesus' face as he drew near. Jesus smiled back as if they were friends. The donkey plodded and Benjamin followed, pushing through the crowd to keep up, and at last he drew close enough to pet the donkey. A small tuft of hair came off in his hands. That night, Benjamin placed the bit of donkey fur in his treasure box. Here's the donkey fur that he put in his box. The coin. In the next days, Benjamin and Eli went to hear Jesus whenever they could. And one day they waited. Eli whispered, "The priests have offered money for someone to betray Jesus." "But why? What has he done?" "He only speaks the truth. They should listen to him, not persecute him." "The priests are jealous. They want Jesus to stop teaching," said Eli. "Someone should warn Jesus." "I'm not afraid," said Benjamin. "I'll go." He pushed through the crowd until he reached one of Jesus' friends. He tugged on the man's sleeve. "Excuse me, sir. Are you with Jesus?" "I am," said the man. "Please, I need to warn him. He's in danger. The priests are offering a bribe to betray him. You must tell—" "Shh," said the man. "Do not repeat this. I'll take care of it." And he slipped a coin into Benjamin's hand. "Thank you, sir. And what is your name?" "I am Judas," said the man as he turned around. That night, Benjamin tucked the shiny denarius into his treasure box. Here's his coin. It slipped right in there. The cup. The next day, Benjamin was asked to help his aunt get ready for unexpected guests. They would be coming for Passover dinner. He went right to work, carrying water jugs. "Did you hear the guest of honor is Jesus?" said the servant girl excitedly. Benjamin's eyes opened wide. Imagine to serve such an important man. He must work hard and do his very best. 2 of Jesus' friends came to help, and Benjamin listened as they talked to Jesus. They loved him so very much. Soon, Jesus arrived and the supper began. If Benjamin listened carefully, he could hear some of their words. But what did Jesus mean when he said the wine was like his blood and would be spilled, and the bread was to be broken like his body? It made no sense. Then Jesus said someone would betray him. Benjamin smiled. He wasn't worried. He knew Judas would prevent this. And after supper, Benjamin found a broken cup. He saved it to remember the night when he served Jesus. Praying hands. Later, Jesus and his friends left to pray. Benjamin wanted to pray too, so he followed at a distance, watching as they finally stopped in a garden. Benjamin sat beneath an olive tree and broke off a twig. He couldn't hear Jesus, but he knew he was praying. Benjamin prayed too, and as he prayed, he rubbed the twig between his hands. Before long, his eyelids grew heavy, and he fell asleep. Loud yelling startled Benjamin, and he leaped up in time just to see his soldiers were taking Jesus away. "Stop! Stop! You can't take him. He hasn't done anything." "Shush, boy," said one of Jesus' friends, holding Benjamin back. "But what's wrong? Why are they taking him?" he cried. "They want to question him." Benjamin pulled away. "But why didn't you stop them?" he argued. But the man just shook his head and walked away. All of Jesus' friends were gone now. Benjamin saw the smooth twig in his hand. "Dear God, please take care of my friend Jesus," he prayed as he walked home. At home, he placed the broken cup and the twig in his box. Here's his twig. Here's my broken cup. The leather strap. "Benjamin, did you hear the news?" asked Eli the next morning. "They locked Jesus up, and everyone says that Judas got a bunch of money to betray him." Benjamin gasped. He had told Judas about the bribe. Maybe this was his fault. He said goodbye to Eli and wandered through the city. What could he do? Was there any way to help? Sounds of shouting made him stop, and he turned to see an angry crowd. "Jesus deserves that beating," snarled a man. "That heretic claims to be God's son. He should be stoned," yelled another, shaking his fist. "But what's going on? Did they hurt Jesus?" asked Benjamin. "What do you know about this Jesus?" growled the old man. They all turned and stared at Benjamin with angry eyes. No, nothing," he stammered. His gaze dropped to the ground where he noticed a small leather strap. He picked it up. It was from the whip the soldiers had used. It was wet with blood, and he tucked it in his tunic and slipped away. Why would anyone want to beat Jesus? Very sad, but it gets better. The thorn. Benjamin continued to walk. If only he could make them release Jesus, but what could a small boy do? He heard loud cries as another crowd gathered at the end of the street. "Hail, King of the Jews!" snarled a soldier as Benjamin pushed his way past men and women, and there stood Jesus. Benjamin looked into Jesus' eyes as Roman soldiers threw shabby robes over his beaten back. Benjamin expected to see hatred, but instead he saw only love. Just then a soldier shoved a crown of thorns on Jesus' head, and another stuck him with a stick. Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. Why were they doing this? A few days ago, everyone called Jesus a king when he entered Jerusalem. Now it seemed they all hated him. Benjamin squatted down and buried his head in his hands. "Please, God, please make them stop," he prayed. When he finally opened his eyes, the crowd had moved along. Jesus was gone. He walked over to where they had scorned his friend and picked up a sharp, broken thorn from the awful crown. He ran home. His parents paused to hear his story and sadly shook their heads and returned to their work. Benjamin placed the thorn and the leather strap in his box, and he cried. Thorns. A lot like mesquite bush thorns, and a leather strap that they used to beat Jesus with. How horrible would it be? I don't want to be beaten with a leather strap, ever. The nail. Benjamin, have you heard? Jesus is going to be crucified. No, he doesn't do anything to deserve that. Eli frowned. My father says the only worst criminals are put to death on a cross. Benjamin went inside and sat in a dark corner of his house. He did not want to talk or even think about this sad news, but in his mind he could see the evil men hurting Jesus. I must go. If this is partly my fault, I can at least be there. I can pray for him. Where are you going? Asked his mother as she opened the door. To help a friend. His mother nodded, touched his cheek, and let him go. As Benjamin climbed the hill, he found a large spike. It was like that the Romans used to nail criminals to the crosses. He tucked it in his tunic and continued on. 3 crosses stood at the top, but he could not force his eyes to look away from the one he knew, his friend. He noticed a small group of people apart from the larger crowd. He knew they were Jesus' dear friends. He sat near them and bowed to pray, but the only words that came out were, I'm sorry, God. I'm so, so sorry. Very sad. The die and the spear. Benjamin watched as the soldiers gambled for Jesus' clothes. He tried to shut his ears to their cruel remarks, and finally he forced himself to look up. Benjamin looked into Jesus' eyes and saw such sorrow and pain that it cut into his heart. But he also saw love. And like before, Jesus looked right at Benjamin. Surely this was his way of saying all would be well, and perhaps he would even do a miracle. But instead, the sky turned dark. Jesus cried out, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. The ground shook, and Jesus breathed his last breath. Benjamin was stunned. Jesus was dead. As if in a dream, Benjamin heard the people move about. He saw a soldier pierce his friend's side with a spear. People hurried to take down the crosses and bodies before the Sabbath began. Soon they were gone, and he was alone. He picked up a stone the soldiers had gambled with and looked at the dark sky. Why had God allowed this? Later that night, he opened his treasure box, placed the nail and the stone inside. He looked at his collection. It had seemed so valuable when he believed Jesus was the king, but now these strange items only filled him with unbearable pain. This might be what the nail looked like that they hammered into Jesus' hand, and a dice that the Romans used to gamble for his clothes, just to make fun of Jesus, not even to honor him at all. The cloth. Benjamin, come, hear the news, his friend Eli called the next morning. Benjamin stuck his head out the window and rubbed his sleepy eyes. They posted guards at Jesus' tomb. Some say that Jesus will return to life. Benjamin perked up. My grandfather told me that Jesus brought some people back from the dead. Maybe it'll happen again, said Eli. But the soldiers say they're making sure people don't steal the body. Quickly, Benjamin dressed and raced to the tomb. Could it be? Could Jesus have returned to life? Oh, how he hoped so. But the huge stone remained in place, and the guards blocked the tomb. With dark, scowling faces, they told him to leave at once. As Benjamin walked slowly down the hill, he noticed a piece of white cloth hanging from a small branch. He plucked it off and rubbed it between his fingers. His parents wove cloth like this for burials. He sighed. Jesus is dead, and he continued to walk home. That night, he sadly placed the cloth in his box. This would surely be the last thing to remember his friend by. He tried to pray, but no words came, and he wondered if God ever even listened. Here's a cloth that's a lot similar to like what they would wrap the dead bodies in. He put that in his box too. The stone. Early the next morning, Benjamin went to the market with his mother. He used to enjoy the crowds in the city, but now they only reminded him of how everyone had turned against Jesus. He shuffled along without looking up. It's a miracle, shrieked a girl. Benjamin stopped in his tracks and listened. Jesus has risen from the dead. The stones have been moved. Benjamin turned and ran from the market and up toward the tomb. Could it possibly be true? Could Jesus have risen from the grave? In his heart, he believed it could be. It must be. He ran even faster, and sure enough, the stone was rolled away. He fell to his knees and thanked God. When he stood, he picked up a sharp piece of broken rock. It must have crumbled from the huge stone. With a joyful heart, he marched back down to the town. Jesus is alive. The good news is Jesus is alive. And in the market, he met a woman who was a friend of Jesus. I knew the good news. He is alive, he said to the woman. Yes, it's the prophet who had said, on the third day he'll rise. Some of us have even seen him. Benjamin ran home, told his parents, and he placed the stone in the box. What a treasure he truly did have. Here's the stone that Benjamin found on his way home from telling the good news. See, I told you it'd get better. He put that in his box too. He is risen. During the next few days, Benjamin and Eli listened as the disciples shared about how Jesus had appeared to them in various places. Jesus said all this came to pass just so forgiveness could be preached to all nations, beginning right here in Jerusalem, explained a disciple. He said that since we saw these things, now we can go out to tell others the good news of his forgiveness. Benjamin smiled. Now he understood that Jesus had forgiven him too, and he wanted to share this good news. He ran home, he got his treasure box, and went out into the streets and gathered all of his friends. Inside this box, he explained, is a great treasure. The children drew closer and listened with excitement, and one by one, Benjamin took each item. He explained how he got it and what it meant. And so you see, he said, as he closed the box and looked into their faces, the treasure is really Jesus. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, we can all be forgiven by God the Father. They cheered and they begged him to tell them the story again. That night, Benjamin opened his box one more time before he went to bed. He examined each item, handling them all with love and care. And finally, he placed the last one back in the box. Then he knelt and he prayed. Dear God, thank you for letting me find all these special treasures, but most of all, thank you for sending me the greatest treasure of all. Thank you for sending Jesus, and help me to be a good servant for Jesus. Help me to tell everyone I know the good news. Amen.